Okay, so very good afternoon. I actually lost count how many webinars we've had, but today we are actually really happy to have these four very real and authentic panel speakers to join us: Paul, Bin, Zelia, and Andrew. So I hope we will have really interesting conversations today. And I've already preempted the panelists on the very pointed questions that the attendees have asked on the panel. So again, a very good afternoon to everybody, and thanks for joining us today. So today we would like to really hear from the key ecosystem players to share with us your insights. But before we do that, maybe we spend about maybe 3 to 4 minutes per person to share very quickly on your background and your views on what the Southeast Asia ecosystem is going to be like second half of 2020 going into 2021, and specifically from your own geography, where do you think things are going to be? And so one of the attendees' question is, do you actually expect a lot of the startups to go under? So do we have any volunteer, or do we just go alphabetical order?
Alphabetical by surname.
Okay, you're testing me, then I'm straight away, then it's Paul first then.
Well done, Andrew, well done. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Santos. I'm a managing partner for Wavemaker. We're early stage investors, so we invest primarily in the seed stage across Southeast Asia, and most of our investments are in enterprise and deep tech companies. So when we say enterprise, it's B2B focused. To give you some perspective, we've done over 120 investments in the region since about 2012, and more than 110, I would say, are in B2B and deep tech. So it's kind of not normal, I think, for the region, but it's what we like. We are in the process of closing our third fund. Our second fund was 66.5 million, and our third fund we're shooting for 100, and looks like we'll get there. Don't want to jinx it until it's done, but final stages. So I guess the first question is what, Xiaoning, around our outlook, is it, or what did you want me to focus on now?
Your outlook for the second half of 2020 and going to 2021, and do you, from what you can see, do you think there's going to be any going under surprises, not particularly within your portfolio, but generally, how do you envisage a whole Southeast Asia ecosystem? Plus, maybe a bit more on Philippines and Singapore side that you are very active in.
Okay.
Personal or fund, it's up to you.
Sure. So look, we're seed stage investors, right? And in the spirit of keeping it real, when you're investing at the seed stage, there are too many unknowns, right? You have a team, you have the initial opportunity they're pursuing, the initial version of the solution, and a lot of hopes and dreams. And so in normal times, that's already difficult to forecast. And so when you add another layer of unknowns, thanks to COVID, you just make it that much more difficult. And under normal times, I often say, my crystal ball has no batteries. Like, who the hell knows, right? And so I can't pretend to know. And so the way we cope with it is basically, you stress test your assumptions, right? And you be pragmatic about how you're going to build your business. And your outlook, what I've seen across our portfolio, really depends on where you're standing, right? Where in the world you are, what business you're in, what your model is, who your customers are. It will change drastically. And now I know we're in this webinar to try to glean learning. So a couple of simple principles that I would see that will sort of impact, I think, the rest of the year. So So the first is I broadly call it small, medium, large, right? Like, so there are small companies that just raised money, large companies that are, you know, in the hundreds of millions, if not billions in valuation, and many in between, the medium, right? Now, the way we invest, we like to see our portfolio companies have about, you know, 18 months runway if possible. And so all of the companies that we just invested in or just recently got invested in, if they're seed stage and they're managing their burn, you know, they should have 12 months runway from here. And that's always a good thing, right? They'll have time to figure things out. The larger ones, you know, guys like Zalingo and whatever, like, they'll have large rounds already with large sponsors behind them, and then business models where they can actually, they have an option to get to profitability. They will have sort of a different view of the world as well. And it's, you know, quote unquote, the medium guys that probably will be the ones facing the most challenge, right? If you think about venture capital investing, by nature, you want to see rapid growth. And that's a portion that, you know, could be under threat right now. And so from among the medium guys, you have to decide, you know, do you cut your cost and scale back your growth? Do you take the risk and try to, you know, hope that your money lasts as long as, and at least until the market comes back? There are decisions in front of you. And even within the medium, there's, you know, broadly the unlucky ones. So yes, so there will be deaths, right? Like I had one portfolio company that, you know, had, you know, $2-3 million worth of revenue last year, was in the process of closing a Series B. And the lead investor was a corporate VC that decided to put a pause on their investment, and then the whole round fell apart. And so chances are this thing will be a fire sale. Why? Because nobody wants to move, right? And then you will have lucky ones, and we can talk about more, you know, luck. But, you know, where I have one company, Odal, that does sort of helps with restaurants generating off-premise revenue. Prior to COVID, they're doing about 15,000 Sing dollars a day in GMV. After the lockdown, they've hit 1.2 million in a day, as an example of just extremes. And so this is what I was saying, right? It's very hard to generalize, and it really depends on where you stand. But if there's one last principle I'd leave out there is, I think this is a time where, you know, crises like this trigger a flight to quality, right? In the short term, you'll have, you know, pressure because some investors will move to the sidelines. Your business model will be, you know, stress tested. And those that survive and those that thrive, there will be fewer of them coming out. And, you know, money won't stay in the sidelines forever. And so those that make it through, and you know, for the few that shine, they will be best positioned to raise money, to win the best employees, to win the best customers. So, you know, it's not all bad news. It's not easy, but I think this will be a time where, you know, your quality will be measured, and you will have the opportunity to show it. And so that's sort of how we're seeing it. Now, last part around the Philippines, you know, just from a macro standpoint, I'm just so grateful I'm here in Singapore. Just the way the government is managing things here versus the way things are managed there is night and day. You know, everybody can estimate how many people have gotten the disease, but it's also a function of how many tests are run. And if you're never able to run the tests, how the hell do you know what the actual number is? And so I speak with friends and family over there, and there's certainly a lot of uncertainty, and then there's a lot of fear. But if anything, at least in the Philippines, you know, it's a resilient country. People will figure things out and find ways to bounce back. It might not be an easy exercise, but yeah, you'll have to do it. Here in Singapore, you know, quite comfortable. And people trust the government, and the government seems to be doing its job. So I'm looking forward to June 1st. Like, Xiaoning was teasing me. Yesterday was the first day they had the barber shops open. So I went out there and got my $15 barber cut and avoid another bad hair month. Not it.
Okay, I was because in Singapore, even the minister was reminding everybody, please do not rush out to the barbers because yesterday was the first day, right?
I wasn't listening.
Okay, so thanks, Paul. So the message I'm hearing loud and clear is survival and get out of this. Then only the heroes that survive can.
Yeah, I mean, the mantra we half jokingly tell our portfolio is survival is the new growth.
Yeah. Otherwise, you have no show to sing. Yeah. Okay. Next, can we hear from Zelia, since alphabetically you are the next.
Yeah. So Paul, you are luckier. My husband is not so lucky. He still can't go to the barber, and I have to be the barber. Yeah, I've twice cut his hair, and second time was a lot better than the first. He had me shave off everything on the first one because it just went wrong. Okay, anyway, just a bit of introduction. So I'm one of the managing partner for Scale Up Malaysia. We are an accelerator that was formed in October 2019. We launched our first cohort in October 2019. We are currently still in our first cohort. We are finalized on the 10 companies that we will actually invest in. Slightly different from other accelerators within the country. We don't look at early stage startups. We look at scale up companies, basically companies which already have a product or a service in place, and they also have got certain tractions going on for them already. So and we would like it to be very much tech focused, but our mantra in investment, and it has not changed, and it will not change even with the current COVID environment, is that we focus on basically investing into companies and helping companies which actually has got strong business fundamentals. So even from day one, as we are selecting our companies, we need to ensure that they have those fundamentals in place. They have a right business model. You have a team that is who can deal with resilience, and not so much on, say, just growing for the sake of growing, but actually looking on a path to profitability. So those are our thesis, investment thesis, in terms of selecting the companies to basically back up. We have done a selection at the end of April, and currently running a due diligence on the companies, and we hope to conclude everything by the end of this month. And we essentially, it was during the MCO where we then had to select our companies, and it was a challenge for us to basically get our investment panel to be conducted online, but we did it, and it was actually quite smooth. Right before going to the investment committee as well, we had sessions to basically train our companies in terms of how they can pitch effectively online. Like, how you can use your hand to do certain movements, how you're supposed to set up your laptop, ensure that you have got battery there, and stuff like that. So we did even preparation of all of those things so that the investment committee, will have no issues with listening to them and everything else. So it was quite an experience, and yeah, it was kind of fun for everybody. So we are looking into going into the second cohort. So how we work is that Scale Up Malaysia actually look at investing into 5 cohort of 10 companies. So over the next 3 years. And this, for every cohort, we will have investors that we will have to raise from. So we have raised the first round of 3 million, of which every company that we invest in will get 200,000 ringgit from us at a fixed valuation. And then subsequent cohorts will also be the same. So we are in talks with certain funders for the second cohort and the third cohort as well. Yeah. So on the question in terms of the startup ecosystem here, when the entire lockdown happened, Magic, one of the agency in here that actually looks into the educational and scaling part of the ecosystem in Malaysia, they did a survey. So the number shows that at least 40% of our startups will die. they won't have enough cash flow to last them even for 2 months. That was actually in March, I believe, the report. Probably those numbers would have already realized. We may have a lot of startups which have already sort of closed shops. And yeah, it's just not the startups. I think every other businesses are also affected, F&B and all. But at the same time, what we're seeing on the investment side of things is that the retail investors are actually, because they are locked at home, right, besides doing work. So now a lot of them are actually going on to looking at alternative funding. Nobody's going to looking into real estate and stuff like that, because already businesses are talking about closing down their office, because since that working from home is very effective, they don't need to pay rental and stuff like that. So property fund, which is usually the class of assets that people invest into, will probably be very quiet for a long while. The retail investors are now looking at the equity crowdfunding platform as well as the P2P side here. So I was just looking at the numbers before this, right? In the last 3 months, from January to March, on the ECF platform itself, 12 million ringgit was raised for 9 of the startup companies. And just in the month of April or so, just on the largest equity crowdfunding platform in Malaysia, which is Pitchin, right? 2 companies actually closed 7 million ringgit. So, and the kind of people that actually invest are the retail ones, not the sophisticated investors and stuff. More than 50% are the retail investors. And so that is on the positive side of things. So you see the growth in that sort of an investment. But of course, then, the ones like, Paul say, if you can't survive, you didn't build the runway proper, those will be the ones that have wrapped up already. Yeah, so those are the happenings on the Malaysia front.
That's actually very interesting statistics. So I should talk to you about coming over to do angel education.
When
so
I can fly.
To angel investing is from one spectrum, one end to the other end.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Next, can we hear from Bin, please? And Bin, actually, you could share a little bit more on the ground, because I was asking halfway. I was reading on the GDP forecast. Within Southeast Asia, Vietnam is the only bright spot. The forecast is plus 2% for GDP growth for 2020. The rest of us are all negative, right?
Yeah, it's been 25 days without consecutive days without a local transmission. So there's 288 cases in Vietnam, 0 deaths. They're trying to keep 1 British pilot alive. He's getting a lung transplant. They don't want to get that one death. So the government has been doing everything they can to keep that one guy alive. Lucky him. But yeah, the country went through lockdown from April 1st to the 22nd. So we've largely been open for business except for clubs and karaoke bars, I guess. But it feels very good here, just because that it's really about that community spread that you're afraid of, right? And if people are flying in and they're being quarantined, you feel safe. Coincidentally, I lived in San Francisco up until January 18th. I moved my family and myself here January 19th. So very lucky, got here just in time. I need to renew my visa, but we feel very fortunate to be here. Xiaoning, thank you for having me. I appreciate everyone for joining us in this webinar. If you're on, I'm sure you guys have, as well, are receiving webinar invites by the dozens every day. So I'm glad you guys are joining us. I'm the general partner for 500 Stars Vietnam. We're a seed stage fund investing in companies with a Vietnam connection. So we write small checks, $100,000 to $200,000. We currently have a portfolio of over 60 companies. Prior to being an investor, I spent most of my life as in operations as a software engineer. My last company I started 4 months before the global financial crisis, so have some experience with downturns. I think our seed round took 2 years, and we had 40 angels in our seed round back in 2009. Sorry, 2010. And so we're taking money anywhere we could. So you can imagine, what Series A closing looked like. We had to just herd cats like nobody's business. But I feel that the downturn with COVID is very different from the global financial crisis, and it's definitely something that I think our founders are seeing differently as well. I guess from a portfolio standpoint, yeah, we've had a large number of companies. We've had to do some discretionary markdowns, but there's been some bright spots. One of our companies closed a $70 million plus round a few weeks ago. There's certain categories that stand out, but yes, it's for most companies in our portfolio, it's really about survival. Here in Vietnam, I think I think government confidence is at an all-time high. There's been a lot of unemployment, obviously, and I think it's going to take time to rebuild. I think there's going to be a little bit of a depressed consumer demand for some time as people need income and credit to be able to spend. And so, and businesses, need to rehire. So that's going to take some time. But I do think there's going to be an increase in startups in Vietnam, just because, entrepreneurship is sometimes born out of necessity. Here you might have a software engineer laid off from a dev shop. He can't find any more work. That idea that was cooking in the back of his mind, last week, last month, he's building it now. And so I'm expecting an increase in startups. And I'm kind of excited about, what's obviously not excited about what's going on and what's happening to people's lives right now and the turmoil it's causing, but I'm excited as an investor, the opportunities coming in 2021, 2020 to 2023. And by the way, I'm in Vũng Tàu, so if I am cutting in and out, please let me know. This is my kind of mini vacation after the last couple months of just portfolio support and LP communications. So taking a little break. The internet seems fine, but let me know if I'm coming in and out.
Will do. Thank you. Okay, next, can we have Mr. Andrew? When I actually meant A to be at the front, but now we're going to the B.
I'm surprised I got away with that, but we'll just keep moving. Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Andrew. I look after the startup ecosystem team at Amazon Web Services. So we have a team of people. We're based in most countries in Southeast Asia. Most of the team are either ex-founders or people who have come out of investment professional roles. So, I think hopefully a few of you are familiar with AWS. We've been working with startups, for quite some time now. And I think, what we're seeing in the market, is very much aligned to what the other panelists are saying. We probably, we have a little bit different view than investors. We're definitely on the sort of, partner supplier kind of view of things, right? So I think we are seeing quite a few startups do well. And, it won't be any major surprises here. They're very logical things as people are homebound. Things around gaming and entertainment. We're seeing large spikes and usage. And some of this obviously has caught some of these startups by surprise. So, what we're trying to do is quickly scramble and help them actually deal with this kind of increase in usage. I think some really practical things around education as well. We spent quite a bit of time with some of the edutech startups, including a few in Vietnam as well. I think in that middle piece, the ones that seem fairly stable from our perspective is definitely on the B2B side, especially B2B in the enterprise, where they've got larger contracts. you know, maybe they're not progressing their sales pipeline any further at the moment, but they've got large customers, maybe FSI, etc. And, you know, they're very much deemed to be very core mission critical kind of software focused capabilities. And then, you know, there's no surprise that we are seeing startups in travel, you know, non-discretionary leisure being very, you know, very hard hit. You know, what we're also scrambling there. And I think, you know, the message that we have with people is, look, cloud's a great way to scale your startup, but also let's not forget cloud's a great way to scale down. Unlike physical infrastructure where you've kind of bought the asset, turn stuff off. If your revenue is down, like we want to talk to all founders and CTOs and make sure that that's getting right-sized and cost optimized. So a lot of CTOs get this. We have found a couple of CTOs that have forgotten where the off switch is. So we're just kind of helping them with that, find that switch again. It's really important. We want all these startups to survive. Yeah. And yeah, so I think, you know, that's how we're seeing the market. And, you know, we're here to support founders in this tough times, and spending a lot of time with customers, you know, either, you know, summing it up, either, you know, their business is scaled up and helping them with that new normal, or helping them right size for kind of where their business is at right now as well.
Thanks, Andrew. So just a very quick summary from what I'm hearing from everyone. Actually, there are bright spots everywhere, and it's very much a survival will take it all when the market comes back. So I think what the message we are all sending out to the founders is that, you know, really lean is not mean. It's a new phrase that I just pick up from another coach. Lean is not mean. It's not wrong. But the thing is, if you don't keep it lean, you don't have a tomorrow for you to continue fighting the show. But there are definitely bright spots for investors to be looking in. And I'm actually just going to maybe a very quick one, just from a show of hand on the screen. Do you actually see valuations drop? Because again, I know on the APEC, we actually saw the founders were sharing 10-15% drop, right, from between the asking and the offer. But do you see that here in a more than 20% sense? You do. So everybody do. So founders actually, they are also realistic about the situation. Okay, so one thing, so actually as I shared, and all the attendees who are on the program, they knew that I actually asked for the question, do you have a question for the panel at the registration form? So one of the questions that stood out to me was the founders asking, they started funding conversations before the COVID, and halfway before the COVID started, and then they realized some of the investors, they were not, the conversation stalled, and then, you know, they were asking what should they do? Should they move on or should they negotiate? And so what's your take on it? And then, you know, if you were in the investor's shoe, what would you advise them? Yeah. Anyone want to take up on this one?
Yeah. Okay. So let me just clarify, right? So you're talking to investors, and were documents signed, and then they're reneging on the documents? Did they, you know, or they just basically stop returning calls? What was the context? Because if it's the first, it's kind of not cool. If you've signed something, you gotta honor it. But, you know, we've seen people not honor signed term sheets before. So if it's the latter, where, you know, they're just not returning calls, yeah, it's probably a sign that they're not that interested right now. And, you know, while you want to be hopeful, you just take it as a sign that, you know, if an investor wants to do something, they'll let you know. And if they tell you they need more time, then they need more time, right? If you want to pressure them to a decision and they say, okay, if you pressure me to decide now, then no, then you decide to do that. Yeah, sometimes, you know, we can't help but be optimistic. We love our company. We want to raise money, and we think people should see what we see. but other times people don't see what we see, and life goes on, right? And so I think you're better served accepting reality. I guess is that's a if I were to just sort of put one principle there, regardless of whether it's a customer, an investor, somebody you want to bring on, just accept reality. If they're not responsive, there's probably no interest. You move on.
I think it might be a little bit more nuanced than that, just because there's a lot of out there too. I think most investors, I'm sure you've been very busy the last couple of months, just haven't had enough time looking at deals. You know, I've spent a large amount of time doing portfolio or communication with the LPs. So I think, like many, I think my internet might be unstable here. Like most other investors, we've had to just take a little bit of a pause. And so I've been telling some of my companies that are positively affected by COVID just to hold off, come back within a couple weeks and check back in. But I think companies that aren't positively affected by COVID, you know, and I think most companies are, you know, talking to new investors is going to be, fundraising is just going to be hard, you know, unless you have a really strong story. You should probably postpone that fundraise if you haven't already started.
Exactly, and that's why if they're not replying, then they have other more important things to do right now. You know, figure something out. Like you can't wait forever. Work on your plan B.
So before COVID-19, I would have told the founders, no, it's like the girl who doesn't return your call is just not interested enough. So move on. But I think COVID, like what Bin said, the nuance is very different. And I think everybody has a whole spectrum of things to focus on. And sometimes it's not about you, it's about them. Right?
Very
okay.
true.
So he's actually used this line before, obviously. Teasing you, I'm teasing you.
I'm happily married. Yeah. Okay, let's come. I was actually going to ask Andrew and Zillian on this question. You work very closely with the founders and the incubators and ecosystem supporters, right? And I see, so it's what I feel this group of people, sometimes we may not be directly investing, but we are like little notes that pay it forward. And our message, because of us, it actually gets spread out. So is there any new insights that you think as the little notes that you work, because every cohort you work with 5 to 10 companies, is it something that you really feel that the founders should really, the incubators could help spread these messages to help the new founders or new companies be more resistant and more resilient?
Yeah, so sorry, Andrew, can I take this first?
Yeah, please.
So hence why, yeah, it crossed our mind as well when we have not actually selected the companies prior to the MCO, and when MCO hit, right? Hence why we took the decision to basically say that, hey, we gotta proceed, right? Because we are investing into the companies that we are actually selecting, and right now cash is king. Just like, you know, those who say that, you know, you're talking to investors are not returning your calls and stuff like that, but then, you know, they potentially would have sort of projected or forecasted, hey, you know, maybe some of these funds are coming in, these are the sort of growth plans that I can put in place. And if we didn't make a decision to then invest during this point of time, when we've been already working very closely with all of the companies over the last 4 to 5 months, then we may have what we call a missed opportunity. So these companies are the ones that we spend a lot of time looking into their business, looking at where their gaps are and how we can basically fill up those gaps from all the different partners that, you know, the experiences that we all have. And also basically it's sort of like the bulk buying mentality thing, right? Together then we are stronger. So when we have a cohort of the 10 companies, it's also easier for us to also talk to people like Amazon, AWS, right? We have got very good support from AWS, basically giving out, say, the club credits to our companies. We've been able to sort of get funding agencies to sort of be able to engage with us first in terms of coming out with the relief funds plans for the startups themselves. And and we feel that as an accelerator in the market, those roles are very, very key, because if you get the founder themselves to knock on each and everyone's door, going to AWS, asking for credits, going to the individual banks, or going to the different agencies that's giving out funds on their own, then they may sort of face a lot of roadblocks. Well, it's because we have been, all the 6 partners in Scale have been in the ecosystem for a very, very long time. We have the ability to basically pull together our resources and get them that sort of assistance when they need that. And that is essentially very, very important for the startups now. Yeah, besides, them being able to sort of sustain on their own, they need as much help as possible from everybody.
Yeah, sorry, I would say something similar. I think, underneath that, we see probably 2 patterns. We do see some founders in real dire straits, and we want to ask, we're asking questions like, look, it's time to kind of think about your suppliers and, and what you're using and, what you really need. And I liked your comment, lean and mean as well, and really to think deeply about these things. So I think that's really important, and we're working with a lot of founders to achieve that, specifically with the AWS piece. I think also there's another set of founders that have a long runway, and, they've got a fairly successful business, but they've been putting off some pretty key and important projects, because they've always been chasing revenue. And with those founders as well, we've been helping them. A lot of that's on the tech side, re-architecting, security, really optimizing what they are using with us as well. Some of those projects that have been nice to have and I'll do it tomorrow can come forward now, especially with some of the later stage startups that they've got some people that have got some freer cycles as well. So we've been able to help a bunch of startups actually get to a better place on the technology side that they've always wanted to get to as well. So I think probably, two messages there. Really think about what you need to survive, and no more, including, using our platform. And then if you have projects that are value add, now may be a good time to get them done. If you've got a long enough runway, this is a good time to, clean up and get organized internally as well. So, they're the things. And then I think also understand that the ecosystem, there is a lot of genuine partners for startups in the ecosystem. Make sure you understand, what they have on offer for you. We've worked with a lot of founders that are really good at understanding what we have to offer and get every dollar of value out of us. And candidly, we've worked with a lot of founders that have just been quite blasé about some of those benefits. Now's a good time to go back and have those conversations. How can you help me?
Andrew, is that public offer of extension of credits?
No, we don't run any. We don't have any specific COVID related programs. But we have all the programs that we've always had. Activate, migration, programs on the value add and connection side. So, we just encourage founders to go have a look at these programs. We have a large portfolio of programs, and, now's a good time to have a look at all of those, and see how they can be helpful, and a lot of them can be more helpful right now as well.
Okay. Bin, were you trying to indicate something? Do you have something to add?
No, I apologize. I was just drinking my drink.
Oh, okay. Actually, there's actually quite a few Q&A coming out on the Q&A chat board. So I'm going to direct our attention over to this side. I'm going to combine the first question and the third question. Basically, what's your view on fintech startups and medtech startups going forward? So for the fintech question, it's more about fintech raising seed capital in Thailand during this period of time. And the other question is on the future of medtech, especially for diagnostic tools in the pathogen detection fields. These are actually from our participants today. Anybody want to take this?
I can't talk about Thailand, but maybe we talk a little bit about the medtech. Well, I mean, it's one of those areas that are going to be just a positive effect on silver lining, you say, that COVID has had, right? prior, the idea that you got in your car and went in traffic, sat in the doctor's office, and doctor's always late, and you're exposing yourself to germs so he can just give you prescriptions, you find that it's pretty stupid, right? So areas like this where, you ask yourself, we're long-term investors, so you have to ask yourself, like, what hasn't changed, right? And I think there's a whole slew of areas that aren't going to change, and you should not invest any differently. But there are areas like telemedicine and certain areas like conferencing or remote working that is fundamentally changed. And so you do have to change your thesis around that. Kind of for those new areas that has changed, as well as just continue to look at opportunities where there might be some distressed assets or opportunities because of something just a little bit more, immediate in terms of its effect. This valuation's gone down or whatever, but we know long-term, people still need to travel, still need to eat, socialize, they need to buy clothes, they need the internet. So when I look at investing through that kind of two aspects, what has changed, what hasn't, it's helped me kind of think about the opportunities.
So for attendees, can you please refrain from using the chat to ask questions, because I have a hard time tracking the two sites. Can you use a Q&A so that we have the same space for me to take a look at things? So I'm going to ask, actually, Francis, the question is actually about everybody's view on post-COVID investments and valuations. So actually, just now we mentioned that in the past 1-2 months, we noticed a drop already. But do you think that coming out Q4, even Q1, Q2 next year, do you think the depression will continue, or you think that it will come back up? Generally speaking, I mean, it's actually a very tricky question to answer because it's vertical based, right? So everybody is going this way. That's why I'm looking at a question, how to answer this. Yeah.
So here's another way I think about these things, right? It almost doesn't matter, right? Like what will happen 6-12 months from now, whether valuations will go up or down, etc. As much as, are you building a valuable business? Again, this whole concept of the flight to quality is, if you have a business that's valuable, if you have a business that's worth backing, people will want to work with you. If you don't, then they won't. What happens in times like this is, again, it may be a short-term crunch. There's a supply and demand, and it just gets harder because there's less money in the ecosystem, more startups looking for money. Then, supply and demand says there's going to be some pricing pressure. But we've also seen companies that were able to, we're in the middle of discussions pre-COVID, and they shook hands and they closed the deals, and there was no renegotiation because the investors coming in thought that there was enough value. So I think we focusing on just building a proper business, an attractive and scalable, interesting business, for me is primary, and then the valuations will fall where they will fall. There's no, we try to show science, but there's a lot of art to it too, right? And it's what both sides will effectively agree, and then you go on. And any valuation until your exit is a midterm mark anyway. And so that's sort of, I wouldn't be so focused on valuations now as much as trying to build a good business.
So actually that goes to one of the questions that one of the startup founder posted on the registration form, is that, is it fair for VCs now to emphasize on profitability versus, and when I saw the question, I'm the old school investor where I care a lot more about foundations. And so when I saw the question, it just shows the mindset, how much the mindset where the anchor was for the past few years. I just want to hear your views. You know, is it fair to ask for profitability now because COVID has hit?
So if I can take this, right? So we understand that, COVID has hit and doing business is even a little bit tougher. It then goes back to the fundamentals, right? So we, good investors who are partners to you, they will basically work with you in terms of the path to profitability. Your business fundamentals has to be there. That you are building a business where it will be sustainable, it will grow, and you are not always out there trying to raise funds like all the time, which is what has been happening over the last many years, right? So I think essentially it's very important where we go back to the fundamentals of actually why did you become an entrepreneur in the first place, right? The resilience in you, the ability for you to be able to pivot, when things are not going the way you may have predicted it to be, you must have sort of the speed to do so. So even like some of the companies within our 10, right? When they first join our programs, they could be, say, addressing a certain market or certain customer segment. When COVID hit, we are then able to see, we are proud to basically why we picked this particular startup or this company to invest in is because the founders themselves he managed to sort of immediately pivot and look at, hey, this particular customer segment is actually affected. I need to now change and retarget. And he's going to have a GP positive soon. In the last 2-3 months, his business has grown tremendously. And these are the sort of businesses or the founders that you actually want to invest into. So investors are now not just looking into what sort of how cool your innovation is going to be and all, but it goes back to whether are you investing in the right team? Can they make it, even when times are bad? Do they know how to sort of work around, or they practice the lean is mean kind of philosophy that you mentioned earlier, right? So they don't expect you to say immediately be profitable, but you must have that mindset that you want to grow your business to be a profitable business. And that's where we will then work with you.
Yep. Thank you, Celia. I'm going back to the Q&A by quite a few questions. It's coming out quite fast. So I'm going to combine a few questions again. So there's one question about, do you observe any switch from equity to debt financing? Actually, probably, so this Mr. Chun, we probably need a bit more information from you. What do you mean by this? Because in the seed investment, usually it's quite common to be either through convertible notes or direct equity investment. So this question is not very clear. And then what's your view on EdTech? Because this whole home-based learning and you got to attend lectures through this and I think just last 2 days, there was this article about US Ivy League students petitioning against the US Ivy Leagues about, the degrading the values of their diploma. There's no longer a premium, but the schools are still charging a premium on their fees. So what do you think of this, the EdTech space? How does it evolve? Yeah.
We have a few companies in our portfolio for EdTech. One is a company that helps you teaches you to speak better English, and they've been positively affected by COVID. So their traction is quite remarkable. We have another EdTech company that closed that large round we talked about that depends on travel. So they help international students get into American schools. And so that dependence on travel is definitely worrisome in the short term. But long term, it's really important for folks to go beyond just getting the, obviously the education, but then part of education is developing social skills, connecting with each other. And so I feel that, there's definitely areas that technology can augment and automate and improve. And there's other areas where, education still is very important to have in person to build those human connections and relationships. And so I see on both sides. I think from a long-term perspective, the company that it does depend on travel, They have such a great business model. They're going to bounce back even harder just because universities still need to have that diversity of income and that diversity of students, especially when I think student visas are probably the easiest way to be able to go internationally, post-COVID.
Okay.
Xiaoning, I hesitate to sort of use this point in time as looking at it as permanent, right? Like I think we've been through different kinds of crises before, and at some point maybe this is the optimistic entrepreneur VC is this too will pass, right? And we don't need to get that carried away. Of course, we take this seriously, but I believe that we will find a way to beat this, whether it's through a vaccine or some other ways. It will be there, and life will go back to normal. I guess we don't need to. That's why I was just saying we don't need to get carried away. The line that's often used these days is what's the new normal, right? Like what does that even mean, right? And possibly one of the ways to think about it is maybe there are things that you've been forced to try now or been forced to do now that you didn't want to do, or you were dragging your feet and you were forced to do it now because of COVID. And then you'll find some of these things acceptable, right? And you will enjoy some of these things such that even after COVID, you'll keep doing them. Then maybe those are part of the new normal. But there will be certain things that you're forced to do today that you absolutely don't want to do. And once things go back to normal, you stop doing them. And so, yeah, so it's good to be aware of what's happening. It's good to be prepared. But I also would caution around getting too carried away to say that, we're doomed to this kind of life.
So to add to that, actually, so before the panel started, I was just sharing that for now, actually, all the AngelCentral pitches are through Zoom. And before that, I was so reluctant to do this. And remember, even internally, we were having debates, right? Because some of our investors are overseas, but how do we get them involved? That's why we do the video recording. But video recording doesn't allow the interaction. So we were talking about having webinars, but I was so adamant against it. But Timo was saying that we should do it. But then the thing is, we are closing our first syndication that was purely from pitch to office visit to debrief and with the investors. It was all through Zoom. So it's something that you have to accept, and it's something that you got to go along with it. But of course, ideally, I would like to be able to talk and chat with the founders face to face. So go back to another question. So how do you find your due diligence done through webinars now? Can you really read the founder? You make them stand personally, then you notice the top is shirt and the bottom is Bermudas.
Again, right? Like we're thinking we're gonna pull our first, check without ever meeting the founder face to face, right? You'll be forced to try it, and it'll be a data point. And I just like you, right? Like maybe now because they forced you to do this, and because you're forced to do this, you'll be comfortable with some sort of hybrid. You'll be comfortable with some levels of interaction face to face, and some levels would be Zoom. I think investing will be the same. Like if we're locked down for a year and we need to deploy capital, then we'll be forced to do it. It's not what we want to do, but we'll be forced to. And then we decide when things go normal what we want to keep. So I might do it just once, just to try and see if we can do it properly.
Okay. So Bin, would you write a check purely over Zoom calls?
Oh yeah. So, we're pre-seed and seed investors. So I'm not looking at months of due diligence and FaceTime so I can sit on your board. So I can definitely write a check over Zoom. It's a different, style of investing. That said, I am advising the companies that we're investing into, like to really be mindful of the fundraising ecosystem, what the climate's going to be like in 18, 24 months. Series A investors and B investors, whatever, they will want to go and meet you in person and be spending a lot of time with you. And so think about, our investors at that stage, at that time, are they going to be on pause or not? And consider, instead of an 18-month runway, try to raise 24 months if you can. And so, yeah, it's definitely, doesn't affect me too much, but I am thinking about downstream rounds.
So I think I'm mindful of the time. We're coming to almost 5 o'clock right now. So this one, this Miss Chan or Mr. Chan, he's asking that if AIs or VCs are withdrawing funds due to COVID and the hard times, what will be the sustainability of the startups? If contracts are renegated, startups will be stuck. They can't move ahead. So I think what he's trying to ask is, if nobody's funding me, what do I do?
Yeah, I think startups in general are either playing offense or defense. And if you are in the position of defense, you're extending runways, you can't. There's only one answer to that. There's only one answer to that, is that's to potentially pivot, all right? And that's your only offensive move.
Yeah.
Or close.
Yeah, no one wants to do that, but
Yeah, but the other thing about this whole startup adventure, like people, it sometimes it's over glamorized, and people like to say go big or go home, and they forget that sometimes you have to go home. And this is one of the things I tell our founders, even outside COVID, is for most people, their life doesn't change if your startup dies or not. For most people, their life doesn't change if your startup succeeds or not, right? But for your stakeholders, you gotta matter enough that they want you around, whether it's your investors or your customers or your employees, right? And sometimes it just doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, there's no shame, right? Like, the last thing you also want to do is waste your time on an idea that shouldn't be funded. Because money that you lose, you can make back. The time that you lose, you can never make back. And so this is sometimes the tough part, right? Like the reason cliches are cliches is because they're right sometimes. Like, was it Winston Churchill who said, never, never, never give up, right? It was right sometimes. And then some people will say, you have to know when to cut your losses, because that's also right sometimes. And this is the tough decision that founders will have to take at some point. Do you fight? Do you go offense, defense, or is it time to just say, there was a good run, I should just stop now and put my time onto something else? It's not the conversation you want to have, but it's an option that you have to consider.
I think at this juncture, a lot of startup founders, they are stuck. And I think it's the willingness to make the hard decisions. At the end of the day, that decision has to come from you. You cannot say that because they're not funding me and that's why it's their fault that my business is not going on. Okay, end of the day, it's your life. You take the call. So if you still need to come out with a prototype or you decide not to, that's your call, Al. Right? Because end of the day, that's your business. If you believe by investing further of your time to build out a prototype and that can bring back some of the contracts or the investors, it's your judgment call, because it's very difficult to give a good answer, because there's a lot of question mark around my head on what's the situation that you are in. So we can't give a good answer in this sense, and we don't have crystal balls like Paul. All our crystal balls are out of battery right now. Okay, so I think thanks a lot, everybody. I'm mindful of everyone's time. So we are at 5 o'clock now, and I really thank the panel today for a very real and very genuine answers to everyone. Whether Andrew is really having the the public offer, I think you have to reach out to Andrew to find out a bit further. But I hope to catch up with everybody over coffee after the sessions. And for the founders who are on the chat, if you really want to talk a bit further, under Angel Central, we actually have an offer of one-on-one personal private chat with you, either with myself, Tegmo, or Desheng. You can go onto our angelcentral.co/COVID-19 to book the time there. The idea is actually to just provide a sounding board to prevent you from having to always have the conversation just with yourself. So having a stranger to listen to your ideas, maybe that will help somewhere. Okay, so thanks a lot, everybody, for your time. We will log off now. Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.